So, let us carry on where we finished off this morning. And we have seen how the idea of dependent origination is considered like the teaching by the middle, and how the two extremes, the two sides, are either the eternalist teaching or the eternalist doctrine, and then you have the annihilationist doctrine on the other side. And dependent origination is found in the middle. So the dependent origination is right view, whereas the two other ones are considered wrong view in Buddhism. And so I want to investigate those two wrong views in a bit more detail, because we're kind of getting into the area where it's most common for people to have wrong views. These are often very powerful wrong views, and very important to be able to recognize them, because once you have that kind of wrong view, then basically you tend to be trapped, and it's very difficult to find a way out once you hold on to these things. Of these two, the most important one, the most common one, is the eternalist doctrine. And you find this within Buddhism. It's quite common, in my experience, to find people who have some idea of eternalism. And often it is kind of hidden, because everyone knows that eternalism is wrong view, so they don't call it eternalism. But they say it's not really. Of course, they don't think it's wrong view; otherwise, they wouldn't have it. They obviously think it's right view, and so you have to kind of investigate carefully, because it's not always going to be obvious what is going on. And so we want to have a bit more clarity about what this kind of view entails, and how to be able to spot it and to not to fall into that trap of eternalism. It's a very attractive view. It is a view that the majority of people kind of lean towards, because people have a tendency to want to exist in one way or another, and that desire to exist coming from the sense of self is a very powerful kind of desire, and that desire shapes our views. Our views are not independent of our desires. On the contrary, they come often from those desires. And so because that is a very powerful driver in the human existence, it means that we have a tendency to lean towards eternalist views. That's kind of how things are. And because of that, it's very easy to distort the teachings of the suttas. This is just the way it seems from my point of view. And to distort it, to align with that craving to exist. And you will see here eternalism, where in fact there is no basis, in my opinion anyway, to see eternalism in the suttas or in your practice or really wherever. So because of this, we have to be very careful and very clear about what we're talking about. The majority of the world's spiritual teachings and religions are eternalist teachings. The idea of a creator God, as I mentioned before, or the ground of existence, like the underlying consciousness or Brahman or whatever it is. All of these things are eternalist teachings. On the other side, we have the annihilationist teaching, and that is also fairly common in the modern world. The materialist idea that when you die, then everything comes to an end. That's an annihilationist teaching. And you find that especially in secular Buddhism. You find, I would argue, that often is a kind of annihilationist doctrine. They have no idea of rebirth, and they also have no idea of eternalism. So they believe in a kind of modern, what they consider a modern scientific outlook, and that is that things just come to an end when you die, and that's the end of the story. So these are the two sides. And again, the more important one is the eternalist side, and you will find many monks around the Buddhist world who, as far as I can tell, are basically eternalists. And for that reason, we have to be careful. So let us say what the Buddha has to say about this. And I picked out a number of suttas that touch on this in various ways. And it's not all about refuting the teaching, it's also about understanding how it relates to the Dhamma as well. So let's just get started. The first sutta here is called the incontrovertible teaching, the Apannaka Sutta. This is found in the Majjhima Nikaya number 60. And it goes as follows. A sensible person reflects on this matter in this way. Yeah? So there's already in the middle of the sutta, that's why this matter refers to something that has already been talked about. Some ascetics and Brahmins said that there is no such thing as the total cessation of future lives. But I have not seen that. Yeah, so some ascetics and Brahmins say that the ending of things is impossible, so things will, in other words, keep going on, for eternity, basically. So this is the eternalist point of view. But I have not seen that. In other words, you don't know. Some ascetics and Brahmins say that there is such a thing as the total cessation of future lives, but I have not known that. So here the cessation of future lives can either be the annihilationist teaching, or it could be the Buddhist idea of cessation, which again is different from annihilation. Without knowing or seeing, it would not be appropriate for me to take one side and declare this is the only truth, other ideas are silly. If those ascetics and Brahmins who say that there is no such thing as the total cessation of future lives are correct, it is possible that I will be guaranteed rebirth among the gods who are formless and made of perception. If those ascetics and Brahmins who say that there is such a thing as the total cessation of future lives are correct, it is possible that I will be extinguished in the present life. So he's looking at two future possibilities. If there is a future existence, then you might be reborn in some very high Brahma realm. And if there is a possibility of cessation, well, then you might get extinguished completely, like Nibbana. So he's kind of looking at the possible future outcomes here. The view of those ascetics and Brahmins who say that there is no such thing as the total cessation of future lives is close to greed, approving, attachment, and grasping. So the idea that cessation is not possible, the idea that life will go on in the future, whether that's an eternalist view or a view of some happy rebirth or whatever, basically what he's saying here is that that is close to grasping attachments and approving and greed. The mind tends to incline towards those things. The mind tends to attach to these kind of things. Why? Well, because people want to exist, and this is what is going on here. And that is, I think, a very interesting insight, because what that means is that if you have an eternalist idea, an eternalist doctrine, and you hold on to that, very often it derives from this desire, greed, attachment to something. Attachment to the sense of self, basically, is what it comes down to. And of course, if it is a kind of attachment, a kind of holding on, then by the very definition, from a Buddhist point of view, it is negative, it is problematic, because attachments tend to lead to suffering down the track. So I think that is it occurs in this sutta. I don't think it occurs many other places, but it's an interesting insight about the idea of eternalism. The view of those ascetics and Brahmins who say that there is such a thing as the total cessation of future lives, that is close to non-greed, non-approving, non-attachment, and non-grasping. If you think that there is such a thing as cessation, well then there's nothing there to grasp onto. If everything just comes to an end, the grasping and the greed for whatever, that also comes to an end with that. And so if you think that greed, attachment, and all of these things are problematic, which obviously they are from a Buddhist point of view, then you want to lean towards cessation rather than towards eternalism or some kind of future existence. This is what the argument here is in this particular sutta. Reflecting like this, they simply practice for repulsion, dispassion, and cessation regarding future lives. So based on that argument, you will lean towards the idea of cessation because that is, does not have those defilements, does not have those problems that otherwise tend to arise in the mind and cause suffering down the track. That is the argument in the Apannaka Sutta. So there you are. I'm not sure how commonly known this particular argument is, but I find it kind of, it is an interesting one. So there you have it. Okay, the next little sutta here is from the Attaka Nipata of the Anguttara Nikaya, and this is called Atviranja, is this particular teaching. And one of the things that you find in the suttas is that the Buddha was often called an annihilationist. People would say that the Buddha, the ascetic Gautama is an annihilationist. It would be one of the claims made about his teachings. And you can see why, because if you have a sense of self and the Buddha teaches a path to cessation, it sounds like something is being annihilated. It sounds problematic from that point of view. But on the other hand, this is also very instructive, because if people call the Buddha an annihilationist, then that seems to be very clear that he could not be an eternalist, because there would be no basis for calling him an annihilationist if actually he believed in some kind of permanent state or some kind of eternal reality. So this already also it points to something fundamental about the Buddhist teaching, that he was called this by the contemporary society of the time. And this is one of these instances. So this Brahmin, he says to the Buddha, Master Gautama is a teacher of annihilationism. And the Buddha replies, there is, Brahmin, a sense in which you could rightly say that I am a teacher of annihilationism. For I teach the annihilation of desire, ill will, and delusion, and the many kinds of unskillful things. In this sense, you could rightly say that I am a teacher of annihilationism, but that is not what you were talking about. Because he knew that what he was talking about, he was basically blaming the Buddha for teaching a teaching of annihilation. But what we are annihilating in Buddhism are the defilements of the mind. What we are really annihilating at the end of the day is dukkha, suffering. And when you annihilate dukkha, what you get? Well, you get the highest happiness. You get the highest meaning. You get anything that is kind of useful in for any kind of being. So again, you have to understand these terms in the context, in the right kind of context, then you understand what is going on here. Okay, so another one. Now we are still in the Anguttara Nikaya. This is the Dasaka Nipata, and this sutta is called Kosala. It's quite a long sutta, but there is only one little point in that sutta that I want to look at. And this is what is called the highest view of outsiders. Outsiders are those people who are outside of the Dhamma, who have other teachings and doctrines, and they have various kind of views, obviously. And some of those views are closer to the Dhamma, and some are further away. So the question is, well, what is the view of outsider that is the closest to the Dhamma? That's one of the questions. And the Buddha says, bhikkhus, of the speculative views held by outsiders, this is the foremost, namely, I might not be, and it might not be mine. I shall not be, and it will not be mine. So you may wonder what on earth that is about. It is one of those strange formulas, and it has been debated a lot by people who do translation, what exactly it means. But it seems quite clearly from context that this actually refers to the annihilationist view. It is actually called the annihilationist view at a certain place in the suttas. I haven't got that here, but it is called that. And so this is the annihilationist view. Yeah, I shall not be. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I shall not be, annihilation. And so this is the foremost view of outsiders, annihilation. Not eternalism, but annihilation is the foremost view. That's kind of interesting. In other words, this is the closest to the Dhamma. Why is that? Well, the Buddha says, for it can be expected that one who holds such a view will not be unrepelled by existence and will not be repelled by the cessation of existence. In other words, if you have this view of annihilation, it means that you might be attracted to cessation. Yeah, because you would rather not exist in the first place. That means that cessation probably sounds good to you. And so that is why it is a fairly easy move to go from annihilation to go to cessation. That is not a difficult move to do. Far more difficult to go from eternalism to cessation. And the Buddha says that there are beings who hold such a view. But even for beings who hold such a view, there is alteration, there is change. In other words, even if you have that view, alteration and change probably here means rebirth. Yeah, you still are part of the cycle of existence. You don't step out of that cycle of existence. Alteration and change might also mean that you lose that view, that view you hold it for a while, and then you lose it eventually. Maybe you become an eternalist down the track. But the main thing, I think, is that this alteration and change just means that you carry on in existence and you don't actually escape existence in this way. So this is like the vibhava tanha, right? This is one of the mysteries of vibhava tanha, the desire to be exterminated. That is often closely related to the Ucceda Ditti or the Ucceda Vada, because the Ucceda Vada, the doctrine of annihilation, and the desire to be annihilated obviously go closely together. And of course, that desire to be annihilated, what does it do? It creates rebirth. That's why it is part of the second noble truth. Yeah, this craving, yadidang, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, it is right there. That craving creates rebirth. It creates change and alteration. And so then the Buddha says, seeing this thus, the instructed noble disciple becomes repelled with it. In other words, repelled with that view. He becomes disenchanted, dispassionate towards that view. And then towards the foremost, not to speak of what is inferior. So even the highest kind of view of outsiders, he become dispassionate towards, let alone any other kind of views. And of course, what you take up then is the view in the middle, which is dependent origination, paticca samuppada. So I don't know if this makes any sense to you. I think maybe to the monks here probably makes good sense because you're used to thinking in this way. But maybe more difficult if you're not so used to these kind of teachings. But they are interesting teachings, and they say a lot about the Dhamma, what the Dhamma actually really is about. So now I want to move on to a kind of very standard expression, or an interesting expression of the eternalist view. And this is found in Digha Nikaya 1, the Brahmajala Sutta, also known as the Divine Net in English. And the Brahmajala Sutta is setting out 62 kind of views that are considered wrong views or speculative views. The Brahmajala Sutta is often referred to elsewhere in the suttas. They will kind of refer to the Brahmajala because the Buddha has kind of laid out all the kind of wrong views that are available to humanity or beings or whatever. And so they talk about the Brahmajala Sutta as a way of kind of eliminating wrong view so we can kind of move forward on the straight path of the Dhamma. That's what that sutta is about. So it's a very kind of important sutta in the Buddhist tradition precisely because it is mentioned elsewhere and it has a certain broad usage among other suttas as well. And one of the main things that the Brahmajala Sutta tries to do away with is the eternalist views. This is one of the main things. And many of those eternalist views, especially the one we're going to have a look at, is the eternalist view that existed prior to Buddhism, that is part of the Vedic tradition. And we'll see that very soon, why that is the case and how it fits with that Vedic tradition. So this is the view I'm going to look at. This is kind of classic eternalism. So this is what they say. This is kind of their view, this eternalist view. The self and the cosmos are eternal, barren, steady as a mountain peak, standing firm like a pillar. They remain the same for all eternity, while these sentient beings wander and transmigrate and pass away and re-arise. So this is an eternalist view. And the idea here, the self is the Atman, the Atta, and the cosmos is Loko, the world. The cosmos and the self are eternal. Why the cosmos and the self? Well, this is the Brahmanical doctrine that we find in the Vedas. The idea that Atman and Brahman are the same. And Brahman is basically the world. Brahman is, if you think of the cosmos is like the appearance of Brahman. Brahman kind of lies behind that, but it appears to us as the cosmos, the world around us. And from their point of view, that sense, the self that we have, and that Brahman, the cosmos, is basically one and the same thing. And our job is to break through that delusion, where it feels like we are separate, and when we give up that illusion, then we can see the unity of these things. So the self and the cosmos, the self and the world are eternal. This is eternalist doctrine, there's no doubt about it. Eternal, they are barren. Barren means that they are what they are. They don't really produce anything. They're always the same. There's no change. If there is change, then they're not barren because they produce something. But there is no production from that. It just remains the same. Change is an illusion. Change is just the surface appearance of it. But behind the facade, things are always the same. Steady as a mountain peak. Steady as Adam's Peak. I'm not sure about Adam's Peak, but anyway. Adam's Peak. Anyway, Sripada, everyone takes that peak to be theirs. Standing firm like a pillar, the Indakila. And so all of these things are just metaphors to try to tell us how steady and how unchangeable these things are. They remain the same for all eternity, while these sentient beings wander and transmigrate and pass away and re-arise. So if you don't understand that, if you don't attain the right kind of samadhi, then you carry on and transmigrate because you haven't really grasped this underlying idea, which then frees you from the cycle of existence. This is the Brahmanical, Advaita Vedanta Brahmanical idea. Why is that? Why do I say this? Because by dint of keen, resolute, committed and diligent effort and the right application of mind, I experience a stillness of the heart of such a kind that I recollect my many kinds of past lives with features and details. Because of this, I know the self and the cosmos are eternal, barren, steady as a mountain peak, standing firm like a pillar. They remain the same for all eternity, while these sentient beings wander and transmigrate, pass away and re-arise. This is the first ground on which some ascetics and Brahmins rely on to assert that the self and the cosmos are eternal. So what is going on here is that this is a person who then attains some kind of deep samadhi. And based on that deep samadhi, they see the past lives and these kind of things. And then they compare that samadhi to the view of transmigration. One of the things about deep samadhi is that it is very attractive. Deep samadhi has those qualities that you tend to think of as eternal. Deep samadhi, when you are there, is very steady. It has the idea of non-duality. There's no separation between you and the object. It becomes one. Eko di bhava, as we saw yesterday in the formula for the second jhana. It is the most blissful thing that you have ever experienced. Yeah, there's no sense of self. The sense of self is completely gone. Only when you come out of it afterwards do you take it as a self. While you're in it, there's no perspective on these things. And it feels real. It feels more real than any experience you have ever had before. It feels hyper real. Your mindfulness is incredibly, incredibly strong and incredibly blissful at the same time. And so, of course, if it feels much more real than any kind of ordinary existence, you're going to take that to be the reality. And because it is unchanging, because it remains the same at all times, it will seem to have this eternal feeling to it. That there is nothing really, it is barren. There's no movement in this particular thing. So it is very, very tempting to take this to be the real self. It's very tempting to think of it as this must surely be what I've been looking for all along. And if you have some background that is, believing in a creator God or believing in some ground of existence or something like that, then you will tend to take this as a confirmation of that particular belief and that particular doctrine, because it matches so beautifully. God, you become one with God, right? Your sense of ego is gone. Being with God is blissful, is happy. It is incredibly powerful. It is incredibly meaningful. It is incredibly real. It has all of the qualities that you would want to have in some kind of eternal existence, being with God or whatever. It matches the ideas really, really well. And so the chances that you will grasp it if you have wrong view is almost certain. The only person who doesn't grasp it is the Buddha. The Buddha is the only one who has the ability to analyze this and say, actually, why should we grasp this? Do we have any real reason for grasping this? And this is the beautiful thing about the Buddha. He looks deeper than anyone else. And so what the Buddha says, he says that, well, actually, this samadhi also arises and ceases. It comes into being because you practice in the spiritual path, and it ceases after some time, after the momentum of the samadhi comes to an end, then you come out of the samadhi. There isn't really any basis for saying it is eternal. The idea that is eternal is just a speculative idea. It may not feel like that because it feels so real. It feels like this is really what it is all about. But at the end of the day, when you analyze it in the right way, when you use Yonaso Manasikara all the way to the core, you realize that any idea of eternalism is always going to be speculative, always going to be just a figment of the imagination, an idea that you have. It cannot really, you can never have any experience that is the counterpart of eternalism. No experience you have can show you that something is eternal, because all experiences are limited in time and limited in space. And so they're always going to be limited in that way. And this is what the Buddha sees. He sees that the samadhi itself is limited. Any rebirth according to that samadhi is also limited. And so that is not really where he wants to go. He wants to find a real end of dukkha, a real end of birth and aging and old age and death, etc., etc. So this is the power of the Buddha, being able to see some of the most beautiful and profound experiences available to humanity, seeing that they too actually ultimately are impermanent and unreliable. They have been created by the human mind, and because they have been created by the human mind, when that creative activity kind of comes to an end, then that state itself must also come to an end. This is beautifully expressed in a number of suttas. I mentioned before the Attakanagara Sutta, and there you have that particular reflection that this samadhi is created by volition, sanchetana and sankhara. It is created by sankharas and chetana, and because it is created by that, then it has a limited lifespan, because anything that is created, anything that is made, must cease. Yang kinchi samudayang dhammang sabbang tang nirodha dhammang ti. Whatever has the nature to arise also has the nature to pass away. That includes these samadhis, includes these very profound states. So it's kind of obvious when you think about it. It's not that hard to understand. But still, even though it is not hard to understand, once you see it, if you haven't got a teacher who shows you that, the chances that you will see it is almost zero. You're going to grasp onto those things as being the essence of what existence is all about. It's only a Buddha that kind of finds his way through that and is able to show us the reality beyond. And so this is why the Dhamma is so rare in the world, because these things are very hard to see. So, so this is the first ground. And then you have so there's 4 grounds on which you come to this kind of eternalist view, and then I will look at the last one of these as well. And what is the 4th ground on which they rely is when some ascetic or Brahmin relies on logic and inquiry. They speak of what they have worked out by logic, following a line of inquiry, expressing their own perspective. That which is called the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and also the body, that self is impermanent, not lasting, transient, and perishable. But that which is called the mind, or sentience, or consciousness, that self is permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, remaining the same for all eternity. That which is called mind, sentient, and consciousness, that which is citta, mano, or vijnana. These 3 things, which are words that are always used to refer to the mind in the suttas, here they are used as a synonym. All of these things basically mean the same thing. There are different angles on the same thing. In technical language, they may be used in different contexts, but in the end, they refer back to the mind, to consciousness, to the kind of the core thing of what it means to be aware of things. That thing, they say, is permanent, that mind. So all of those words, citta, mano, vijnana, actually are mistakenly taken as permanent. All of those things are just as impermanent as everything else. They do not remain for eternity. This is the 4th ground on which some ascetics and Brahmins rely on to assert that the self and the cosmos are partially eternal. So anyone who says that the mind is eternal, the mano is eternal, citta is eternal, vijnana is eternal, well, that is countered right there in that particular view. That is a wrong view according to the Brahmajala Sutta. And okay, so the Brahmajala Sutta for you here. This is quite dense. There's a lot of things going on here. So I hope you don't find it too much. Just as I'm saying it's too much, I'm going to take another one which also is very dense and deep. So we're going to look at the Sab-asava Sutta, all the taints, Majjhima Nikaya number 2. It also has a very interesting discussion of wrong views about self. And so the Buddha says, I say that the destruction of the asavas, the defilements or corruptions or taints, is for one who knows and sees, not for one who does not know and see. Who knows and sees what? Wise attention and unwise attention. When one attends unwisely, unarisen asavas arise, and arisen asavas increase. When one attends wisely, unarisen asavas do not arise, and arisen asavas are abandoned. So the root thing here is to understand the difference between yoniso manasikara and ayoniso manasikara, wise attention and unwise attention. Someone who sees that can expect the ending of the asavas, the destruction of the asavas. So that is how the asavas come to be destroyed. If you have wise attention all the time and no unwise attention, then eventually you come to the end of the path. Why is that? Well, because wise attention is defined as that which reduces the defilements, and increases the good qualities. Yeah? So by its very definition, it is what you need. And of course, this is exactly what the stream mentor knows. The stream mentor doesn't have any doubt anymore about kusala dhamma or akusala dhamma, and because he or she doesn't have any doubt about that, it means that that person always has wise attention, because they know what should be developed and what shouldn't. If you are a putujana, then you will not be clear about the distinction between kusala and akusala. So sometimes you will have unwise attention, and sometimes you will have wise attention. And in the beginning, you have to rely on the Buddha to point out to you what is unwholesome and what is unwholesome, so that you kind of have a guide until you start seeing this for yourself. So this is yoniso manasikara and ayoniso manasikara, the root in many ways of the path. And so then the sutta goes on for a while, and then we come to the various kind of asavas that need to be abandoned by different techniques or in different ways. And one of the ways of abandoning the asavas is by seeing dasana pahataba of asava. Asavas to be abandoned by seeing. So what asavas should be abandoned by seeing? Here, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskillful and undisciplined in their teaching, who has no regard for true people and is unskillful and undisciplined in their teaching, does not understand what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, they attend to those things unfit for attention, and they do not attend to those things fit for attention. So this is a problem. You attend to all the wrong things, and your defilements increase, and you get further and further away from happiness and nibbana and all good things. You become a miserable person. This is the way to path to misery. Please don't take the path to misery. That is a bad idea. And what are the things unfit for attention that he attends to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen asava of sensual desire arises in them, and the arisen asava of sensual desire increases. The unarisen asava of being, existence, bhavasava, arises in them, and the arisen asava of being, bhavasava, increases. The unarisen asava of ignorance, of avidya, arises in them, and the arisen asava of avidya increases. These are the three asavas, kamasava, bhavasava, avidyasava, and they increase, they become strengthened. You have more desire for sensuality, more desire for existence, and you become more and more foolish as the ignorance increases in you. These are the things unfit for attention that he attends to. And what are the things fit for attention that he does not attend to? They are the things such that when they attend to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in them, and the arisen asava of sensual desire is abandoned. The arisen asava of existence, or being, does not arise in them, and the arisen asava of existence or desire for existence, if you like, is abandoned. The unarisen asava of delusion or ignorance does not arise in them, and the arisen asava of delusion is abandoned. These are the things fit for attention that he does not attend to. By attending to things unfit for attention, and by not attending to things fit for attention, both unarisen asavas arise in them, and arisen asavas increase. This is why people don't like the suttas, because it's too repetitive. It just goes on and on sometimes. But the basic idea is very clear. It is how we relate to the world, how we look upon things that matters, whether defilements increase or not. If you look at things in a certain way, you will be attracted to them, and desires will arise. If you look at things in a different way, you will not be attracted to them, and desires will go down. Yeah, if you look at people in a certain way, you will be attracted to a person. If you look at them in a different way, you will not be attracted to that person. So how do you think about people? How do you think about relationships? Well, that will be the underlying thing that decides whether you have yoniso manasikara or ayoniso manasikara. It's about perceiving things. If you see the dukkha in something, the problem in something, then you will move away, and then you will be doing the right kind of thing. And the same thing with bhava. As long as you want to exist, because you think existence is great, then of course that will increase, that bhavasava. But if you start to understand the problem of samsaric existence, then your bhavasava will start to decline and eventually decrease. That is kind of what is meant by all of this. So it's relating to the world in the right kind of way, in a way whereby these defilements actually go down and good qualities go up. And now we come to the interesting part. This is how they attend unwisely. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What did I become in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what? What shall I become in the future? And I'm sure you can recognize those kind of thoughts in yourself. Yeah, oh, what's going to happen to me? When am I going to go? Am I, when you are young and you look kind of at your life and you wonder what's going to happen, what kind of job you're going to have, what kind of relationships you're going to have, all of these kind of things. You're always thinking about the future. And we do that throughout our lives to lesser or greater degrees, wondering about the future. Whenever you try to solve a problem, you are in a sense thinking about the future in one way or another. Or you think about the past, you grieve for the past, or you think how wonderful the past was or how bad it was or whatever. All of these things are related to our sense of self somehow. We want to become something. We want to be something. It revolves around the idea of I, and that is why it is wrong. That is why it is ayoniso manasikara, because it assumes some kind of personal existence that shall be happy in the future or shall be good in the future in one way or another. The arahant doesn't think about the future. The arahant is completely uninterested in the future. The arahant knows that there's no happiness to be had there anyway. The arahant just wants to, looking forward to cessation, the ending of everything. That's the arahant. It was a very different approach to all of these things. Or else, they are inwardly perplexed about the present thus. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? So this kind of, who am I actually? What is this person? And trying to understand who you are. What are you in relation to the khandhas? Are you consciousness? Are you the doer? Are feelings yours? Can you control these things? Etc., etc. All of these concerns about oneself, reflecting, philosophizing about the existence of who one actually is. All of this is unwise attention. When he attends unwisely in this way, one of 6 views arise in him. The view, the self exists for me, arises in him as true and established. The self is the permanent entity inside, permanently existing entity, that the real me, which exists within, which is unalterable and unchangeable and always the same, that becomes a true and established view when you have ayoniso manasikara, reflecting about yourself. Or the view, no self exists for me, arises in him as true and established. So let me just stop there, because that already now is interesting. The view, no self exists for me, that sounds like the Buddha's view, right? It sounds like we are dealing with the Buddha here, so how can that be called wrong view? And the answer is, remember earlier on we were talking about the attita and nattita. Yeah, these are their existence and non-existence. And this is the eternalism and annihilationism. Attita is eternalism, nattita is annihilationism. And so here we have a very similar kind of phrasing. Natti me atta, atti me atta. And so the idea here, natti me atta, is actually an annihilationist view, whereas atti me atta is an eternalist point of view. So when I have no self, what it means, I have no eternal self. I don't have a self which lasts forever. And this kind of fits with the Brahmanical idea. Remember, we are dealing here, contrasting this to the Brahmanical teachings in the Vedas. And there, the Atman is a permanently existing thing. And so it implies eternalism. If you don't have that Atta, that is Uchedavada. You will just disappear when you die. There was no idea of Nirodha or Paticca Samuppada. That is the Buddha's innovation in seeing the world in a new way. So this is the meaning here when we say, I have no self, or where are we? No self exists for me becomes true and established. Bhante Sujato, I looked at his translation. I should maybe have used his translation, but he translates this as the first one is myself survives. Myself does not survive. After death or something like that. So survival is the eternalist view. The self carries on after you die. Non-survival is the annihilationist view. And these verbs atti and natti can have that future meaning, of what happens to you after you die. Even though they are present tense, they can have a future meaning in this way. And so these verbs are used a little bit loosely. So this is an important point, and it's kind of very subtle, and it's not hard. It's kind of hard to see because it's very easy to think that here we actually have the Buddhist view, but actually you don't, and that's why it is part of the wrong view here. Otherwise, no self becomes a wrong view, and that's problematic. Or the view, I perceive self with self, arises in him as true and established. The self perceives the self. The inherent essence perceives its own inherent essence. Or the view, I perceive not self with self. Some of the appendages, some of the things that you own, if let's say, for example, you take consciousness to be the self, and then perception belongs to that consciousness, and so you perceive with perception the reality of consciousness. So the non-self part perceives the self. Can you? Is it okay if you do it this evening? That'd be all right, because we're running out of time a little bit. I'm a bit afraid if we do too much here. Perceive not self with self, or you perceive self with not self. So the previous one was you use consciousness to perceive all the other aggregates that are not self, and now you use the aggregates to perceive the thing which is the essence of the being. These are just alternative ways of perceiving self with not self. So that is the end of it. And you will notice that the one thing that is missing there is you perceive not self with not self. Because that is the Buddhist view, perceiving not self with not self. Right now, we are all perceiving here. Perception is there. What is it that you're perceiving? You're perceiving panchakanda. That is also not self. So you're perceiving not self with not self. And that is the Buddhist kind of view. And that is why it is missing from the list here. So, then, or else, he has some such view as this. It is this self of mind that speaks and feels and experiences here and there the result of good and bad actions. But this self of mine is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and it will endure as long as eternity. Yes, that is kind of the full idea of a self expressed completely. And then the Buddha says this speculative view is called a thicket of views, the wilderness of views, the contortion of views, the vacillation of views, the fetter of views. Fettered by the fetter of views, the untaught ordinary disciple is not freed from birth, old age, and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. He is not freed from suffering, I say, says the Buddha. So all of these things, they tie you down. All of these things, they drive the round of rebirth. I've already been talking about how sensual desire tends to drive the round of rebirth. But even if you eliminate sensual desires and all you have left is the samadhi, and you take that samadhi to be somehow eternal, that round of rebirth is then driven by that desire to exist that comes from this kind of self-view that you have here. This also drives the view, the round of existence. And so that's why you have the karma-asava and the bhava-asava, and both of those two things have to be overcome. So that is the untaught disciple, the putujana, the asuttava putujana, the untaught ordinary person. So what is the opposite? The opposite is as follows. The well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true people and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, understand what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, they do not attend to those things unfit for attention, but they attend to those things fit for attention. What are the things unfit for attention that they do not attend to? They are things such as when he attends to them, the unarisen asava of sensual desire arises in them. The unarisen asava of desire for existence arising in them, and the unarisen asava of ignorance either arises in them or increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what are the things fit for attention that he does attend to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen asava of sensual desire does not arise in him, etc., etc. And the arisen asava of ignorance is abandoned. They do not arise and they are abandoned. These are the things unfit for attention that he attends to. And by not attending to things unfit for attention and by attending to things fit for attention, the unarisen asavas do not arise in him and the arisen asavas are abandoned. So a very complicated way of saying that if you use attention wisely, if you see something desirable, like something, I would like that car or whatever, then you think, actually, I'm a monk, don't need that car, something like that, or whatever, so you see some person that you are attracted to, you realize, actually, I'm not interested in relationships, so you abandon that desire very quickly, and so that is really all it means, and although it is kind of explained in a very complicated way. Of course, it is in reality, it's quite subtle, because there are many things that can give rise to all kinds of defilements, and so you need to be on the lookout all the time to avoid defilements from arising. So, what then does that person attend to? In more detail. What are the things that he actually does attend to in a wise way? We remember the previous person, the putujana, the unlearned person, always thinks in terms of an I. This is not how the wise person thinks. Instead, the wise person thinks as follows. They attend wisely, this is suffering. They attend wisely, this is the origin of suffering. They attend wisely, this is the cessation of suffering. They attend wisely, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Instead of looking at the panch upadana khandha and seeing a self, and then reflecting, who was I in the past? What will I be in the future? When the noble person, or the one who attends wisely, looked into the past, all they see is panchupadana kanda. What they see is dukkha. That is attending wisely. Instead of seeing a self, they see a problem. They see an issue to be resolved. When they look at the future, it's the same thing. All they see is dukkha. When they look at the present, instead of seeing an I, they see dukkha there. And when they see dukkha, and they understand what that is, well, then they actually abandon that whole idea of an I. That whole of an idea of an I doesn't make any sense anymore, because an I is not supposed to be dukkha, not supposed to be impermanent, not supposed to be a problem. So you contemplate everything in terms of the Four Noble Truths, and especially the first one is very powerful. And then also the other ones. And then when he attends wisely in this way, 3 fetters, 3 sanyojanas are abandoned in him. Personality view, this is the Sakkaya Ditthi, doubt, Vichikicha, adherence to rule and observances, Sila Bhatta Paramasa. These are called the asavas that should be abandoned by seeing. So that is how you become a stream entry, by attending in the right way to the Four Noble Truths. So this gives you a very clear kind of distinction between, on the one hand, the contemplations of an I, and we saw just before how this tends to lead to an eternalist point of view, where he says that, what does it say again? He says that this self of mine that speaks and feels and experiences here and there the results of good and bad actions, this self of mine is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. That is the eternalist view. And then on the other hand, you have what we have seen now, which is the understanding of dukkha, and the understanding of the arising of dukkha and the cessation of dukkha, which is the cessationist view of the Buddha. And those are the 2 contrasts once more. So there you are. This is a lot about the eternalist view. So I'm going to stop there because it's a good place to stop. And tomorrow we're going to kind of round off the whole discussion by looking a little bit more at the eternalist view before we look at one sutta to do with the annihilationist view, and that will be the rounding off of everything tomorrow morning. So please carry on enjoying the retreat until the very end. Remember that this is a rare opportunity to come together and practice in this way, so please use the opportunity and the time to the best of your ability. At 6 o'clock, I will be downstairs in the discussion room, and any of the monks who want to come and say hello and just have a chat, you're very welcome to do so. So far it's been kind of quite formal discussions, but it's nice to have a bit of an informal chat as well. So anyone who speaks reasonably good English or anyone who wants to come, you're very welcome to come down there. So I'll be there at 6 for that hour or so. Okay, so we'll see you again this evening.